Welcome to Around Town, featuring what's happening in the greater Concord area. I'm your host, Dick Patten. It's a pleasure to welcome you as we're into the spring season full now, and pretty soon we'll be planting pansies, that's it, pansies, with what my grandmother always used to plant in April. But here we are with today past State Representative Max Abramson. And you just told me you got elected to the what board? Planning board?
Planning board. We actually have a planning board meeting tonight.
Where now? Seabrook?
It's in Seabrook.
Gee, I'm surprised you'd have such a thing down there.
A planning board?
Yeah.
So there's a long story behind that. Back in the 1970s, and they weren't even having a large amount of growth and development. They didn't really need zoning, so a lot of small town America, you still didn't have zoning in the 70s, 80s, and in a lot of northern New England, you didn't have zoning even in the 1990s. A lot of that stuff just came about fairly recently.
Well,
cities, of course, have had it for a while, but
yeah.
1950s, some of them even the 1930s. But so they enacted zoning in the 1970s, and it was okay, but a lot of people said, well, this is a disaster, it's too many headaches, it's too many problems. So then, in the 1980s, they said this is, it's causing more problems than it's worth. So they tore up the old zoning, and that was another kind of disaster with subdivisions where the houses put together too closely, and they didn't. The way the state laws are set up, they wanted to have like building inspectors and the fire inspector go in, and maybe a conservation commission. Once you did away with zoning, they had nothing. So that was a disaster. So then they went back to zoning again, and that was an even bigger disaster. So now, for about the last 10 years, they've tried to modernize, and I've been on the planning board while we're trying to switch from the conventional zoning, which is a disaster in small towns, to form-based codes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, I guess it didn't go in front of your committee, I had a bill to modernize form-based codes. So in a nutshell, a lot of cities, especially down south and maybe in California, are switching to form-based codes. Essentially, your conventional zoning codes say, here's what you use the building for, but who cares what it looks like? Form-based codes say it doesn't matter so much what your building is used for, but its appearance. So in a residential area, you'd have just houses. In a town center, you have town center type buildings brought up to the sidewalk, and they deal with the frontage and the signage standards and that kind of thing. So I had a bill. So it turns out we don't have the process in place. You have to have a public charrette. You have to put the architectural standards, landscaping standards, and signage standards have to go into site plan review so that the planning board can deal with that specifically. And that never came about. And that was... that bill didn't happen, ironically, because there was one person on the planning board who also happened to be a state representative on that committee, and he didn't understand it at all, and they killed the bill because it didn't process with them.
That was the young man that took somebody's place down there.
No, that was an older guy.
Wow.
But now, of course, we're now having to deal with all those problems in Seabrook on the planning board, where you have all the conventional zoning codes that are causing all these problems, plus you have form-based codes put over the top of that as an overlay district. Then you have the conservation overlay district and another, and it's become difficult to develop the kind of quality development that you want to have. Well, I think I told you last time, Nashville, Tennessee, they switched from conventional zoning with their 15, 20 different boards and commissions and committees you had to go through, and of course the city council and whatnot, the zoning board of adjustment and all these ZBA and ZBB and so forth. They cut that approval process down from 18 months down to 55 days. And because they did that, they saw a dramatic improvement in development, quality of development, because the form-based codes specify you have to have quality development, and how the buildings are shaped and how high they can be, minimum height, maximum height, architectural standards, the glass out front, the placement of trees, all that's covered under the form-based codes. And they found property values went up by 75% in 5 years in the city, especially in commercial areas. So that was about 47% more than the surrounding area in Davis County. So there was a dramatic improvement in quality of life, and the quality of the development going in places like that in Sarasota Springs, Florida, in one part of Miami-Dade County, some parts of Virginia, Columbia Turnpike. All of these things have gotten redeveloped using form-based codes. And developers fought it at first because they said, oh no, here comes some more zoning rules. But no, it's actually a change from conventional zoning to form-based codes. And you spend more on the building, but you save so much time and money that it ends up kind of balancing out.
So tell me something, Max. Are you going to, now we got 2 months away from filing period. You going to come back in the legislature this year? Try to come back in?
Well, I only filed last time because we couldn't get somebody to run at the last minute.
For governor?
For State House. I ran in 2014 for State House because we couldn't get a candidate.
Yeah.
And put my name at the last minute, and of course right after that, then this drunk driver put his name in. It's a guy, I don't want to mention his name. But I've been calling around, and we've been trying to get people, and all the legislators from our district are retiring, and it's a scramble to get people, so I might be one of those last minute.
Are you going back in as a Republican or a Libertarian?
Probably Republican.
Yeah.
I'm kind of about half either. A lot of the Republicans I know up there are about half Libertarian, half Republican.
But they don't dare go as Libertarians, though.
Well, the New Hampshire Republican platform is pretty broad, and it's open to, social conservatives, defense conservatives, economic conservatives, and libertarians, and even moderates, a whole kind of broad range of people. And so, as you know, all the Democrats cling together. They have the powwow, the caucus in the morning, and then Steve Shirtliff goes up like this, and all the Democrats, it's like watching, what was that, Star Wars, the Imperial Stormtroopers. And then the Republicans are just like going all over the place, like the Rebel Alliance. Everyone has their own thing, and they're all, nobody's following orders. They're all just kind of, it's like herding house cats.
Well, I'll tell you though, you talk about them, you talk about the Dems, but you talk to the Republicans, had their little red handkerchiefs or the little green handkerchiefs. They're waving them around, and so I finally decided to last week I was there. I said, we were all talking in that section 1 about what's going on here. It's like, of course. So finally, the next time I went in, I brought in my Michigan car flag, like I did the first term I was there.
But there's no blue button. There's no yellow button in front of us.
Well, so I started waving mine, just like that. I said, hey, I thought I was at a football rally, the March Madness. And the basketball, and I mean, enough,
but I told you
enough though.
I told you about the Republican primary process. I guess that's a whole nother. Maybe that's for another show.
Yeah.
But I put up a bunch of slides on Facebook, and I got a few likes and a few responses.
Yeah.
And I wanted to show a pattern of what I've been calling the socialism belt. And you really have to see the world maps to see. So I was wondering if I could show these on your show.
Yeah, I guess he's gonna show them on. I know he's gonna show them.
So I know it's not Concord, specifically Concord related. So this I think is the most famous. It's the one that talks about economic freedom. Economic freedom is a whole bunch of things. Most professional economists, I think 93% support free markets, 93% support free trade, 91% are pro-immigration. It's lower spending, lowering and simplifying tax rates, protection of property rights, intellectual property, and that type of thing. So in what they call economic freedom is basically how easy it is to start a business versus how much red tape and bureaucracy, fees and fines and impact fees and assessment fees you have to deal with. Now obviously the freer countries, the Western countries, tend also to be the richest, but this is one that's been going around. Heritage puts one out, but there are a whole bunch of different groups, liberal, conservative, progressive groups, libertarian groups that put this out, and they come up with essentially the same thing. Countries with more economic freedom have more economic activity, and they also tend to have higher living standards, better working conditions, safer working conditions, and they have more revenue for doing, all of the things that they need to do.
Boy.
And that results, you'll see it's almost the same map. The greener, more economically free countries like Germany, Switzerland, most of Europe, America, Canada, and again Australia, those countries are still much better off, economically at least. And then you have, like I say, what I call the socialism belt, and it's countries from about, the northern part of South America and Central America, and they run through Africa and come up, this way.
Yeah.
And they tend to be poorer because it's almost impossible to start a business. You don't own your own property in some of those countries. They have out of control inflation. They don't have stable currencies and low interest rates. They don't have, the economic stability of Switzerland. But people tend to notice less some of the other quality of life issues, like infant mortality rates and the quality of hospitals and doctors and medical service and the availability of medical service. And here you see kind of the same pattern. The freer countries tend to have lower infant mortality rates because they can afford higher standards for medical care, more regular visits. They can get prenatal care and identify problems earlier on. That one was actually one of the hardest to print out because it's a weird file format. But here you see the same pattern again. And this is what's called liberal democracy, or it's how much control the general public has over the form of government that they live under. We have a federal system where we live under a federal government, state government, county government, and local government. And until the last 50 or 60 years, we've always tried to keep all the money at the local level and handle problems at the local level. And over time, we've become we become less green. We're starting to become more like some of the European countries where the national government is centralizing power, but we're still relatively free compared to a lot of the kind of socialism belt countries. But again, you see the same pattern going on. This one is interesting. It's called corruption by country, and it's kind of subjective. But again, it's the socialism belt. Corrupt socialist third world countries where you have these kind of dictatorial regimes. Hugo Chavez lives in Venezuela, lives in the fancy house. All his political supporters get rich, and all the people are poor and standing in bread lines. In fact, there's a pattern when you break it down, and I wish I could have brought some maps for America. You can see the same thing. When you have kind of Detroit rules policies, you still have the same shortages of things: food, clothing, shelter, housing, parking, transportation. You have in socialist countries, cities, counties, and states all over the world. The more socialist they are, the more government controls things, the harder it is to deliver bread. So you've got bread lines and rolling brownouts, and I've been to 50 or 60 countries around the world, and I can definitely vouch for what I've seen. The freer countries are certainly better off.
Yeah.
However, here's another map. Sorry, it's a different color scheme. This is the homicide rate.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And the homicide rates in places like Russia, Ukraine, more recently, Guatemala, are 10 times higher than the U.S.
Wow.
In Honduras, it's 20 times higher. And there's another map that I wasn't able to print out that shows that countries with private citizens have more guns. The higher the larger the percentage of people having firearms, again, usually Western countries, the lower the crime rate, because career criminals don't want to, victimize you if they think you might be carrying a gun. They don't know, which guy is going to be packing. We have something like 83 million registered firearms owners. Some of these get unusual. This is average IQ. I don't like IQ tests for measuring intelligence. I've taken a number of IQ tests, and I always end up, on the test, I end up, way up in the top 1 or 2%.
Well, there you go.
Well, I don't mind the result. It makes me look good, but there's a lot more to it. There's EQ, emotional intelligence. There's social intelligence. There's creativity, which is almost impossible to measure on standardized tests. There are a lot of things that go into that. So I don't like that. But you'll see again, it is kind of the same pattern.
Yeah.
But here I want you to notice that countries like Russia, China, a lot of Southeastern Asian countries, Vietnam, Mongolia, the standards for education have historically been very high, and you've also noticed that economic freedom, not personal freedom, not civic freedom, but economic freedom has been going up in this part of the world. And all of these countries, from Eastern Europe all the way to China, have gradually been getting better and better. Their living standards have been going up. Now, that's...
you got a lot of homework there, bud.
Oh, yeah, I did my homework. Now, that's... To just qualify this, when I was in China, their middle class, their crane operators, our crane operators make maybe $60 an hour. Theirs make $3.40 an hour.
Oh, I bet. I bet.
We talked to their longshoremen. Our longshoremen make $60,000-$70,000 a year. In China, their longshoremen are up to about $1.40 an hour. So that's considered middle class in China. So if you really want to get ahead in China, you have to start a business. But because they allow people to start businesses, and they've made it very easy to do that, they've had 6% economic growth. And China has recently surpassed us for total GDP. Of course, they've got 5 times our population. There's nothing you can do about that. But this is life expectancy. This is another quality of life issue. And again, you see the same pattern along the socialism belt running straight up here, where you have more corruption, more authoritarian regimes, the people have less control, you have more of the vote buying and whatnot. And of course the results are bad, but the freer countries have higher standards, better medical care, more standardized medical care, and because their doctors are a little better off financially, they can afford to do more charity. And finally, the last one. Oops.
Ian, we
got one more. This is the percentage below the national poverty line. And the poverty line is different in every country, but it's poverty line according to their cost of living. And this is probably a better example. Again, countries like Chile down here, it doesn't matter what continent you are. And there are a few countries in Africa, and even the Middle East, where the cost of living is very low, and there are good quality jobs compared to the surrounding areas. And again, the countries that are freer, that have more economic freedom, are better off.
Yep, good. We're going to leave these with Ian, and he'll make sure we get them on full on the screen there for us, Ian. Max.
I wonder if I can mention this one, because this is one of my own, and I put a lot of time into this one. And it's what I did is everyone talks about who's better for the economy, Republican president or Democrat president. You and I know that's the legislative branch. We work in the legislative branch at the state level that sets legislative mandates and tax policy and whatnot. So I decided to compare which party was in Congress. I think this is the House, this is the Senate. And this goes all the way back to 1970. And it shows a pretty steady pattern that when you've had Democrat majorities in Congress, that unemployment tends to be going up, and you get shortages of things, the gas lines and the energy crisis that happened in the 70s. But that wasn't just the 70s. Almost every time that you've had a Democrat majority, unemployment has been going up. And almost every time you have a Republican majority, unemployment is going down, although there are a few exceptions like this one right here. But in general, unemployment tends to go down under Republican majorities because Republican majorities in Congress and the legislature are more business friendly and more business oriented. And I know you know as well as I do that the majority of Republican legislators we work with are business owners, small business, big business. And I've been surprised to find that a lot of them are actually, have many tens of millions of dollars and are actually very wealthy, very, very successful. And they just some of them just kind of dabble in politics and just say, well, I'll just vote my conscience. I'm going to vote for what I think.
Well, there you go.
And they can be some of the most interesting characters to deal with, but they can also be some of the hardest people to what's the word? There's some of the hardest people to convince.
Well, that's good. Well, we've got to call it a show done for this one, Max, but I definitely want you to come back on again. And actually, we get a full show out of this, so that's good. So.
Oh, you didn't mention the tie.
Well, that's Michigan. Of course, we're all mourning after losing last night, so we've already had that one. But anyway. So with that in mind, we want to thank Max Abramson for coming in and bring us up to date with some things. He did a lot of homework, so we'll be talking with him again. So thank you to Ian Marx, and with that in mind, we'll have a great day, and we'll talk with you soon. I'm your host, Dick Patten, for Around Town.
And thank you.